My name's Akash Prasad. I'm the writer, director of this film, All the Same, and I also played the character, Prisoner Zero.
Hello, my name is Moses Alexander, and I'm playing the character of Prisoner X.
I would say my main inspiration for writing All the Same came a few years back in 2016, the Paris bombings, and I just remember the aftermath and just the impact it was having on different lives within Asian communities, and for me it became an opportunity to begin crafting something that advocated unity and understanding. It was just something so pent up that I wanted to have an outlet myself to kind of just channel something that was educating. And last year, following the death of George Floyd, I just remember scrolling through my phone on my notepad section, and then I found this spoken word poem that I begun writing when I was 17 or 18 years old. I couldn't fathom how in 2020 this was something that was still so prevalent. I knew this was obviously something that's been going on for generations, and for those incidents in particular to get as much coverage on the news that it did, a part of me was also optimistic and hopeful.
I remember very, very strongly, I remember seeing the images on Instagram. Those were the first things I remember seeing. And I couldn't even bring myself to watch the whole video. I remember. It filled me with sadness, and the only thing that kind of balanced out that sadness and that grief was the fact that people were talking about it. The fact that people were willing to share it and speak out about it. You know, my sister said to me, she said, once you see something, you cannot unsee it. If you look away, that's still a choice, because you've still seen it. And that's the only. So the role of Prisoner X came about when, the script was passed to me. And I've read a lot of the character's dialogue, and I just really connected with what he was saying. I connected with the fact that he was talking about current topics. He was talking about the fact that he's living in a world that is in this strange crossover period where it's trying to break free of old traditions but still being held back by the past. And that intrigues me. I feel like where we are as a society really is a product of where we've been and the dreams of what we now have to make a better future, And I feel like it came as such an important part because a few weeks prior, I'd actually been stopped, unlawfully grabbed and detained, and actually held down by numerous police officers for a crime they perceived that I was committing, despite a lack of evidence or right to stop me. That itself was a catalyst for this role to kind of land on my lap. And for me to put that energy and make something beautiful. I think you can't control what happens in life sometimes, you really can't, but you can choose what you do with that energy. That is always your choice, So I'm grateful to have the choice to channel it into something as beautiful as this.
So, throwing back to last year in March when we found out London was going into a lockdown, I just remember feeling a lot of anxiety. I did lose my job at the time, working in hospitality, and all of my studying moved online, so I found myself with a lot more free time, stuck in four walls with my family, and it just meant a lot of time to reflect on all of my choices to date. It meant time to kind of just identify parts of my life that I would like to change and parts of my career I'd like to have a little bit more control over. But at first it was a hell of a lot of anxiety. I had to kind of find a disconnect from everything happening in the world to kind of retain my inner peace and my essence, I guess.
For me, it opened up the reality that anything can change. Like, reality is under no obligation to be the same yesterday as it will be today or even tomorrow. obviously, yeah, rehearsing in a pandemic isn't easy. So one of the challenges for me was channeling the energy. Even though it is filmed, on a screen, it is such a theatrical piece. I feel it needs that kind of presence that you will get from going to see a theatre play. So that was a very interesting change to channel that, but we actually did it really well. Yeah. We really did, because we had to do less in terms of physicality. We had to do more in terms of emotion, in a sense, to really understand the characters. So it was different, but I'm grateful we had that experience to explore it in that way, so we could understand where it needed to be.
The rehearsal process during COVID was a nightmare. I mean, it was rewarding, but Mo's a busy person, I'm a busy person too. So actually being able to make time, it was like a real push for giving ourselves a good few hours to sit down every week or so and actually be able to rehearse. So the costume design came from a good friend of mine, G Fluff, aka Matazamo Arts. She's based up in Manchester, and she drew these very vivid images of a hand with a chain attached, and on the chain you had the words racism. Surrounding the chain you had many different slogans, connotations of what racism could entail in our modern world, in a first world society, how suppressed it could be, and I just felt like it was very clever. I said to myself, okay, I'm writing this film, I want to incorporate her artwork. Then the next stage was finding something to complete it, which led me to finding jumpsuits. Overall, it was just such an exciting process. Having Ju sent the t-shirts in the post 2.5 weeks before shooting, and then I remember on the day we shot all the same, getting Moses and myself into costume and just seeing how everything kind of came together. It was great to see how during this whole lockdown you had creatives from different parts of the country still being able to pull their creative resources together to create something so vivid. So one of the biggest challenges was post-production. Still being in a lockdown, it did mean it took a lot more time to get very basic things done, which we would have probably been able to achieve if we were sat in the same room in one day. However, it did give us a bit more time and attention to detail with these different aspects of the process. One of the highlights of post-production, I would say, was crafting the score for All the Same. I knew when I was writing this piece that the amount of information retained is just so overwhelming. You need to still try and be able to receive and understand as much as you possibly can, so the music cannot be too overwhelming. It just needs to find a fine balance and be able to complement it as well as it can. It also led us to finding our group of composers, the Doge, based in Italy, and it was just seeing the work they created. It was just phenomenal, and they never held back anything creatively. They really wanted to give the film the justice, the time, respect and attention it deserved. Despite COVID being a factor, that extra bit of time in post-production meant we were able to fine-tune it as best as we possibly could have.
What I set out to achieve was to evoke a sense of raw emotion through my piece and through audience members watching. I wanted audience members to feel the desperation in Prisoner X's words, in his voice, in his eyes, in his physicality. And I wanted them to bring themselves back to a place where they felt the same. Because we are all the same,
One thing I really wanted to achieve with All the Same was as simple as, if I can help shape another person's perspective and they can get a more 360 view of what's happening around them in different parts of the world, then that's great. If I can just help a person see more and maybe challenge their previous ways of thinking, that's all I really, really want. Just people to feel more open, to be more expressive, yet with still maintaining this sensitivity of who they are and what's happened and what's happening around them, just still being mindful and respectful, but at the same time, I don't think a person should ever be afraid to stand up for themselves and to stick by their principles.